My name is Elias. I know all of you except Ricardo. I'm an Erasmus student here from the Norwegian Academy of Music. And I will talk about my way of working here now, but only one part of it, which is the score part. And I will talk about different ways that I work with the score. So I will talk about the score as remembrance, and the score as choreography, the score as value, the value of the score, making the score part of the performance, and the effect of the score. So first is the remembrance part. Yes. So this is the most traditional way of using the score. You put it on a note stand in front of the musician, and you have the audience behind it. The musicians can't see the score. And yes, so I use this way of using the score in this piece, Turn to Happiness. For solo percussion, medium-sized woodblock and live electronics. And why I use the score like this, is because the score contains a lot of different parameters. You can see here you have the body posture of the performance, you have the eyes of the performance, the mouth, right and left hand, the distance to the woodblock, and then the breath. Yes. And then you have like the fingers as well down there. Yes. So the score is just to help the performer remember what to play. Very basic. We can look at this.
Elias, do you want it louder?
Yes. My second point, choreography. With this I mean the score as a guide to generate movement. So for example, a written note can be seen as a musical intention. We can expect the note to be played, but we can also see the note as a choreographic intention behind the music. So, if I write this note, I can anticipate the sound of it, but I can also anticipate the movement required to produce this note. So with this, this idea of anticipating movement from producing sound is to me very evident in Stephen Takasugi's piece Sideshow. So in the first part, movement 1D, Man Who Couldn't Stop Laughing part 2, you can perceive the rhythm music more as a trigger to physical response than musical, in a sense. So we can just watch this as well. Yes, so this was my fundamental idea when composing this other piece I will show you now. It's called Insulette, and it's for accordion, violin, and audience. So the musicians are separated by a wall. So we have the audience on both sides, and the score is more about the movement of the musicians than the sound, in a sense. So now I work with the scores in like two different categories. You can say like indirect notation and direct notation regarding to the movement. So for example, this can be seen as an indirect notation. It's just very typical notation, which also generates movements, but it's very unspecified movement. While as here, it's much more clear what I want musicians to do with their instruments and their bodies. And this kind of just changes throughout the piece. So you have up in the violin, which is supposed to turn the violin, and different things. And here the accordion is like pushing his accordion on the floor. And then sitting and walking. Yeah, different things. Number 3, value. So another way of seeing a score is like its value, its cultural value and its production value. So the cultural value I see as the score in itself as an like aesthetic object. So for example, something like this or like this, while the production value is the economical value of the score. So this was the idea of the next piece, called Vocal Workout for Voice Instructor and CD Player. And the score in this piece is packaged as a CD. And the performer is told to set up a table / stand with CDs by the entrance of the concert venue and sell CDs. And then the piece in itself is like this home workout you can do. So on the CD there's like this drum backing track, and you do this at home. Yeah. Different things. Number 4, performance. With this, it's really about putting the score in the center of attention, putting it in front of the audience so they can see it. And this I did in the piece called Tales Told Twice for small ensemble and puppet. You can see here that preparations in the latter part of the piece, the cellist will sit by the puppet, which is here, and read from the score. The score will have to be placed inside the box with the puppet in advance. And then you get like these instructions in the score, what you're supposed to do. So you kind of make this book and you put it in the box. And here's some instructions for the cellist. In the latter part of the piece, the cellist takes a more performative role. Graphic intent indicates movement together with the cello in different directions. This movement should be visible but not too theatrical. The score indicates a route which the cellist is asked to take in order to end up by the puppet. Yeah, etc. So this is the ensemble score. So if we look at like the cello part, this is kind of where the cellist begins this movement towards the puppet, starting with this solo. Then you see there some direct movement notes, and then towards the end she's standing up and starts to like walk towards the box and ends up by the box over there. So we can look at this passage. So here the score also, like the closing on the score is also the closing of the piece. So it kind of comes back. Yeah, this is inside the book score. It's just a smaller, slightly reduced version. 5.
Yes, I'm a bit confused in number 4. So, because the performers also had these tablets in front of them, but the score is. So where is the score? What is happening there?
So the score is here, like her score is this one, and they have the normal score, so like the typical.
But the musicians are only looking at the score in the puppet house. No.
So it's the same score, everything, but that score is another version because it's a smaller format. It's just, but it's the same.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It's symbolic that it's there.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, 5. So now looking at the performance from a bigger perspective, the score can play an important part in the total expression. So thinking about how the musician as a visual entity is affected by the score when performing with or without it, as I showed earlier. So when the score is in front, it tends to happen that the performer gets kind of locked it's no really communication with the audience. So when you instead remove it, it's much open, as I see it. So, for example, in Trond Reinholdsen's piece Einzelgänger, that I think most of you saw, in the first part, this wasn't played, but in the first part, these two characters are supposed to like hand out the score to the audience. And this really changes the room a lot. Because like by doing so, the audience can see the whole score is exposed and they can read what will happen before it happens. But also like looking in the room, you see the audience looking down, and at the stage is this crazy stuff going on. This is kind of the audience totally disregarding the piece on stage, which I think is really interesting. Yes, expectation and the room. So now is the final piece I will show. It's called Situational Scenes for Performer and Interactive Score. It will be performed at the Sign on Site in February here at the Hochschule. And in this piece I tried to combine all these points I made throughout this presentation. So the score is like this clear visual entity. It's also the choreography and it's also the scenography of the piece. Yes, it's divided in two parts. I have the score here, so I'll just show you the first part. So we can divide the room kind of.
Do you need a stand?
Yeah, please. No, I just stole it from the floor.
Ah. Oh.
Yes, so this is kind of the first part, which is really, notated, as to say. So the performance is always kind of locked down in the score, and the audience can see what will happen, what happens, etc. So you have the beat markings. Stefan, if you roll it up.
Yes.
And then there's the hand sign. Yes. So there's also this working with the body, like forcing the performance down to on force, and also working like with distance of the size of the score, kind of decides which distance you can read the score. So I'm working on a digital version now, where it's a lot of like small, super small notes. So you really would have to be super close to the score as well. And then over here, so this is the last part of the first piece, last of the first part. It's supposed to like rip it apart. And then starts this second part here. So it's like three situations. Fast and aggressive, like beating a score, sharing it, making a lot of sound, then like getting tired lying down on it, then like covering yourself in it, then they like rise up like a blanket, they walk around with it, and then they take this roll that's been ripped apart, and then they will use this as kind of score, new score. And then for the last part, they will again roll it out, and then it will be like feet markings, and then it will be hand markings, and then in the end it will be like the body, and they just lay down and lie, kind of, yeah. And that's the end of the piece. Yeah. And that was everything I have. Also.
You gonna perform it for by yourself or?
No, it will be another student here for sure. Yeah.
That's a good question, actually. Why not yourself?
Well, I mean, I kind of see my own part as just the score is me and the performance is a performer. I don't see myself as a performer really. So this is like what I do and what I like to do. Yeah. Mm. Yeah.
You want me to roll this out?
Yeah, I can.
No, it's fine.
Performance.
Yeah. That's why we invited you, because
Hey,
that was the second part of the... This is hand drawn, right?
Yes.
Everything?
Yeah.
But so after one performance, it's kaput.
Yes. So I'm in contact with some publishers to print up some. Yeah.
That makes me very self-conscious now.
Where do you get the paper?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, it's drawing paper. Many composers use this paper. I think that's the main audience for that.
I used to use this paper.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. It's great. You can write by meters and not by pages. How many meters of music do you want?
Smooth, like on the road.
But is there no anxiety that, so it's like everything is hand, did you make some kind of mistake in the midst of like
Yeah.
25 meters?
You don't want to make
And
it.
that's
To
like-
start over.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's also why I'm doing this digital version now, because it's
That's why they invited T-Pex.
yeah, and also like when printing it, you would have to scan this instead of just sending a PDF. So it's yes.
I have a couple of questions. Or anybody has questions before?
Go ahead.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I really liked it. Great. Just as Stefan, I was also a bit confused with the performance part, which is also fine. The one thing I was thinking of while seeing your performance, seeing the presentation and the slideshow, is if you have thought of formats like lecture performances. Maybe not for you as a performer, but like the slideshow as a medium quasi.
Yeah. I haven't thought of it for myself as doing a piece with it, but I've seen pieces with it and I've experienced it.
Also with some of the examples you gave, or people that do that.
Yeah.
And yeah, the whole time I was like, it was very graphical quality of the slideshow and with the text. When you started, I was kind of like, oh, this will go. The thing is the performance.
Yeah. Yeah.
And with if your focus is notation and score, it could be very interesting to. This can be a score.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Just something that occurred to me while watching. But yeah, super interesting.
Yeah.
Would love to see the performance.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
No one else wants to. So you mentioned this idea of the score as choreography.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you're familiar with the terms descriptive and prescriptive notation, because I think this is what you're referencing here. So descriptive notation is the type of notation that describes a certain sound that the performer is meant to produce, and prescriptive notation prescribes actions, right? So the focus is on what the performer has to do, not on the sound that will come out of that. So I thought this might be something you want to look into. It's a term that's been around since the 50s. Charles Siger, I think, has written about it, and so on. The other question for me is, when you say performance as a score, or the score as performance, sorry, I'm not entirely convinced by this description, because I don't think that the performance is the score, but the score is being referenced in the performance, right? So there is this kind of dialogue between the two media, where, you know, the medium of performance references the medium of score. So I'm not sure exactly, you know, what term I would use to describe it, but I wouldn't say that the score here is the performance. The score becomes part of the performance, is referenced in the performance, but obviously there's a lot more going on, right? It's not just, yeah, I don't know what your take on this.
Yeah, so with the piece I showed with the puppet, for example, the score is only one small part of the total thing, but it's the way I thought of the score in that piece. And as well as with this piece, it's especially with this piece, because it revolves more around the score itself.
And then, I don't know, does someone else have a question? Or should I? Okay.
Go ahead.
Perhaps you could explain a little bit more, because you introduced these categories somewhat briefly. What exactly you mean with score as remembrance?
So this is just for to remember music, like sight reading the score, reading the notes. So instead of learning it by heart, you can have the score in front of you and play from the score.
I'm not sure I'm getting this.
So it's the very typical way that you see. When you have the score in front of you, play from the score. This is it.
Okay, so that's, yeah, you're describing essentially the normal score situation.
Yes.
Okay, I get it now.
Yeah, I also had a thought. Well, first of all, also thanks a lot. That was visually very appealing, like your scores are, and very interesting too. Yeah, probably in a longer presentation, which was not the situation now, but it would be helpful also to define these categories a bit more detailed, or a bit better, but that was definitely not the idea now. My thought was actually something else. In the last piece that you showed us, you said, so you have this beautiful scroll here. The fact that it's a scroll immediately brings or makes you think of ancient technology, of ancient writing, of something valuable, and it looks also really, I mean, it's clearly a piece of art just by itself too. It seems much more valuable than a printed out score of whichever composer. And but then you mentioned that you're also making a digital version of it, which I understand very well from a practical perspective, but my question is, my thought was, okay, perhaps it's also a consideration for you to have that, and you reference it in the beginning, you said that a score is also, or has a value, I think number 4 or 5. But yeah, you could probably also push that further in the sense of the score as a piece of art, and perhaps because you're also into subverting situations in your music and in your work, perhaps that's also something you can work with, like this idea of a piece of art, visual arts. Is this visual art or not? Is it the music or not? Can I sell it on the art market? What does that mean? Can I sell a digital piece, a digital score on the art market? Perhaps there is a conceptual richness there that could also be explored. I was also thinking about NFTs, which is kind of the opposite, like this non-fungible tokens, which are only digital artworks. And this is kind of the opposite. But then when you think of making a digital score, somehow to me sounds like a pity, because it's almost like a part of what this piece is about is kind of thrown out of the window.
Yes, and also I agree with you. Because right now it's really about time. The
Mhm.
concert is in February, and they need time to rehearse it. And this is not complete. So I won't have time to write it out.
Yeah.
But I agree that also this, for me, this ripping apart the score, like destroying it, it has a bigger impact when you know it's been handwritten for many hours. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, but even if it would be printed by a printer on a scroll of 25 meters is different than the PDF you read on a tablet.
Yeah, so it would be this, but printed. Yes.
I completely misunderstood you. Oh, sorry. Okay.
Yes.
But still, okay. Mm-hmm.
Can I ask another question? I find that a lot of what we do is akin to dance, and I thought, first of all, have you thought of working with dancers? And second of all, have you thought of exploring choreography notation? Because not unlike music, choreographies are also notated, and they have their own systems, which I don't know much about, but I do know they exist. So have you thought of exploring this as musical notation?
Mm-hmm. So I have worked with dancers, and I'm doing a project now in Oslo as well with dancers. And I've seen the notation, like some of the notation, not all. And it's very appealing visually. But I say I would have to go really deep into it to be comfortable with doing it, I'd say. Because now when I'm working with dancers, I leave it up to them more, because they know more of it than I do. And I can comment on it, but I really want to leave it to them, as well as with performers. This is my part, and what happens, what the performers do with it is their thing. I don't really want to get too involved in it. Yeah, but yeah.
I have another question. What are the roles of the instruments in, for example, the piece with the puppets, or perhaps you could say something in general about your work?
Yes, so it's based on 3 folk stories. So this piece was written for this ensemble, Arepo, and it's Noel from Schweiz, and it's Marco from Italy, Madara from Latvia, and Elizabeth from New York. So they're all, like these 3, are telling stories from their home countries in their own language, and then Elizabeth is this kind of translator in a sense, making her own story of these 3 stories. And then these stories are projected on the puppet in the box. So yeah, I don't know if it's...
Yeah, no, I think my question was very unclear. Apologies. I'll try again. What is the role of the music performed on the instruments? Because I feel a lot of the focus, or perhaps even the majority of the focus, is not really on the sound, it's more on other things. So I was trying to imagine how you make then compositional decisions, sonic compositional decisions, and how important they are. And if you think that one step further, I was wondering, okay, do you actually really need instruments? What if they are not playing physical instruments, but they're like air playing, cello, or perhaps not even playing an existing instrument, but I don't know.
Yes, so in this piece, when I work with this puppet as well, I need to consider the movements of the puppets, and then this affects what I can do with music also. So it's also always this, what you say, when you have to compromise, I feel like. Yeah, and the second question, you said?
No,
Yeah.
I guess it was the same kind of question, like, yeah.
Yeah.
I had a thought sort of related to that. which is that, yeah, I agree that the attention is really on the puppet and on the kind of physical activity of the performers, which I think is the intention. But I wonder if there are ways that you could sonically draw more attention to those physical actions. And one idea, for example, is like different types of amplification, either amplification of like the physical box, or in many cases, at least in this recording, the voices were not really intelligible. I couldn't understand them at all. I'm not sure what the acoustics were like in the space or how close the audience was, but maybe that's something to consider, is whether or not to amplify the voices, whether or not you want them to be intelligible, and whether or not there are ways you can draw more attention to the gesture. And like, yeah, Stefan's question of that kind of balance between the prescribed sonic material that they're performing versus the physical activity.
Yes, so about amplification, it kind of crosses over to another thing I'm really thinking about when composing, which is reproduction value of a piece. So for example, this piece and the woodblock piece and this piece, it's very portable. This box, you just fold it apart and you can take it in a bag, so involving more electronic parts and amplification, it just kind of makes it less portable, I feel like, and more risks of it not working. Yeah, but yeah.
What do you mean reproductional value
So
of the piece? Do you think about it? Do you think about the economics of the work?
It's more important to me that I can reach places that really isn't, where pieces really isn't set up. So I'm from this very small village in Sweden. Never had this, wasn't existent. So it's very important to me that I'm able to also travel with the piece to reach not only concert hall, big schools, big institutions, And then also smaller formats, lesser people, like solo pieces, duo pieces.
Just adding to what Jason said, I think, and now to what you said, two comments. I think actually what Jason said, it's a very good example, the Takasugi piece you showed, which is the sound calls attention to, like the sound and the movement kind of work together. And they call attention to each other, so to say. So you have moments, that's a great piece. You have moments where there's kind of the sound amplifies the movement, so to say, or the movement amplifies the sounds, not necessarily in an electronic way, but you get what I'm saying. And the other thing, I think to what you just said, I totally get the portability aspect. I do think you can always think about electronics in a portable way. There are small electronics that you can put in your backpack. Just saying. Like everything can be portable if that is like if that is a thing you have, which I understand very well. I've had it for many years as well. Like idea that I should be able to bring a piece in a backpack, for example. But you can bring anything in a backpack. Like if that is the criteria, you can find ways to make things work like that. Just in pro of electronics.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And to both of your comments, I see it also very similarly with the example you showed, that I feel there is some kind of tension between the sonic material and the movements and the situation, that I ask myself what the choice is. Why these sounds with these movements, so to say?
Yeah. And then in this piece is in regards to the text, which is said. So it's mostly just building a sonic image of the text in this piece. Yeah.
But then it's also this question of intelligibility and whether or not the audience understands and perceives the relationship between these two things. Yeah.
Yep.
There's definitely also something I find really interesting, and it makes sense now what you said about that you come from a small village and that you want to be able to bring these things in those contexts. But there is something very intimate about the works you've shown. Actually, all of them. It's either for a small group of people to witness. They have to sit close in general to get the full experience. And yeah, again, perhaps that's something that you could think through a bit more. Like, do you want? Because then, if you want amplification, perhaps that breaks a bit of that intimacy. But if you don't use the amplification, then perhaps you have to really make sure that there's only a small amount of audience and super close by, or that it's something very, very intimate, or just for one audience member, perhaps, or.
Yes,
Yeah.
and then like an option to this would be multiple concerts a day. But yeah.
Yeah, or not. I mean, you seem to think about economic value in some ways, or in many ways, actually, many layers. You could also think of it in that sense, like you have only one score, you have only one performance. Perhaps the ticket costs 200 euros. I'm joking, but yeah, it's also not an innocent, I mean, there is something there that you can also think through more. As a critique on the economics of neoliberalism or not, or I don't know, but it's something that's, yeah, it's kind of lying on your desk, but I feel, but hasn't been fully thought about.
Can I ask a very random technical question? So this last piece you showed with the roll on the floor, would the floor be amplified? Would the sounds of the performer's steps or movements be part of the piece, or is it just the visual aspect that?
No, so it's the interaction with the paper. So like these sounds and.
Will it be amplified then?
I hadn't thought of it, no, because the audience will be standing around and
Okay.
close to it.
It's a small venue then.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You will do this at the concert here,
Yes.
and how do you see the setup on stage with audience and paper?
So it's just a room, no chairs. The audience move as they want.
And the score rolls all the time. It's like.
So the first part will be rolled out, and then it's the
An audience has shoes on, shoes off,
whatever they want. It's not.
but perhaps something for you to consider too.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
Because it becomes super intimate if you have to take off your shoes, and
Yeah.
perhaps not everybody would like to do that, or perhaps you wouldn't want everybody to do that, but
But then the piece really starts with taking off the shoes, and then it's also where will it start and when does it end? You know.
depends. I mean, you can ask them to do it before they enter the room, and then actually.
Yes, but then I mean the piece then starts before the room take, because then they're building up an expectation of what will happen.
Sure.
Yeah.
It becomes part of it, yeah.
And then composer has shoes on.
Well,
The composer.
Yeah, that's the first question. The second question, the performer.
yes, because this is also what we
Sorry.
talked about, like the material the performer
but you
will
can
have.
have also sounds when you are barefoot.
Yeah, but like this
Yeah,
sounds,
it's true. Yeah.
it's more
Of
with
course.
the yeah. But like, because there's some part when you're supposed to scratch the paper, then you will need nails and like.
Okay.
There's some requirements necessary to it.
Don't cut your nails before.
Yeah.
Do you know the piece of Padasek?
No?
Maurizio Caro?
No.
Ah, definitely have a look at it. It's for 5 walkers.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's not with the score on the floor, it's different, but he also has, it's a pentagon on the floor, and then there are different surfaces on the floor as well, and the performers have to.
Yeah, Ensemble Intercontemporain did a version of this, I think.
Yeah,
It was the
there
same.
are many
They did a
versions.
Yeah.
film.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Is it good? I wouldn't think of them doing a piece like that. Okay.
It's exactly what you think.
Hmm.
Do you know Jeppe Ernst?
The Danish, no?
Danish, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know so much about his.
With the touching,
No.
he has a lot of touching pieces.
Oh.
And
Touching music.
it's touching music, yeah. But from a score, I mean, also they are a lot of them are completely silent or almost completely silent. Not all of them, but from a notation perspective, it's I would say there are touching points.
Mm-hmm.
Could be cool to check out.
Mm-hmm.
Can I ask a biographical question?
Yes.
What is your relationship to drawing? I mean, I
Um,
guess you're drawing everything, right?
Yeah. So I draw a lot when I was a kid. I thought that I thought it was what I was going to do before I came into music, and then it's kind of circled back
Right.
into the composition
Yes.
part.
I still remember when we met for the first time in Darmstadt last year, and we had so many conversations, and I still remember that he was always like drawing something, and everything was so beautiful. And I was like, wow, he's also an illustrator.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in the way you opened the sentence, I thought you met him 20 years ago.
No,
I still remember
just
last
last year.
year.
No. Maybe I exaggerated.
Feels like 20 years.
I still remember last year.
Great, thanks so much.
Thank you.